Here's what I would say about that, though. Be very careful, number one, that they're actually going to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they don't have any ulterior motives to try to get back with you.
Mm-hmm.
And number three, make sure you filter it through your own analysis, because that's their perspective. It doesn't mean that it's the truth.
Did you have the courage on the next kind of go around to really address and confront some of the things that you don't really want in your relationship anymore? Did you have the courage to say, "Oop, this is a red flag and I'm not going to steamroll over that again because I know how this ultimately could end"? Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast. Today for episode number 134. What can you learn from your relationship history? Before we jump into this episode, we want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show and I believe more than 47 others, so many others. Mm-hmm. Personal growth, personal development, self-improvement, mental health, all of the positive impact that they are putting out into the world with all positive content, what I desperately needed as a kid, but couldn't find because podcasts weren't a thing because I'm 76 years old. I'm joking. Also, sweetheart, ladies first, what's your intention for today's episode?
My intention for this episode is to help all of our listeners take a quick peek in the rearview mirror and help them understand where they've been and to really pull some of the high spots and low spots that we're going to get into to check in on what it is about their past that they want to not just have in the rearview mirror, but rather they can put in front of them.
So how do you know where you want to go if you've not known where you have been?
And if you don't know what you like.
And don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was on with a relationship talks coaching client last night, and he was talking about 3 relationships, anonymous always, 3 relationships that he's been in. He's been in a 3-year relationship, another 3-year relationship, and essentially a 6-year relationship. So he said, I've been in a relationship for 12 years. I don't even know what it's like to be single.
Yeah.
This is wild.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want everyone out there watching or listening to this, assuming you're not driving or in a car and you are actually available to do this, go into a dark room. I'm kidding. It doesn't have to be dark. It doesn't have to be dark. I knew you'd think that was funny. Sometimes my jokes are just for Emilia. But anyways, grab a notebook or a journal, sit down, and let's do bright spots and dark spots. We're going to go through your relationship history. Now, for some people, it'll be small. For some people, it'll be, whoa, what have I done? Mm-hmm. And that's okay. So right, wrong, or indifferent. Sit down and think about all of your past relationships. And this is sort of the frame, okay? Bright spots and dark spots. So I'm going to use this anonymous example to help walk everyone through it. So his first relationship was with a woman, we'll call her Sally. It's not the real name. And he said, now keep in mind, this is a 3-year relationship from 15 to 18. Mm-hmm. So the context is important here, right? We were kids. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. And I said, okay, what are the top 3 things that you adored about that relationship? And he said she was high energy. We matched energy. Mm-hmm. We were both into sports at the time. We had similar interests. We had very similar interests. I said, okay. And there was one other one. I forget off the top of my head. Oh, he said she's really attractive. Yeah. He kind of withheld that one, and I could tell. And I was like, did you think she was really hot? And he's like, yeah. Cool. All right. Top 3 negative things. And this is the harder part because you got to look at the truth. You got to look at the truth. Not everyone's perfect. Not everyone's perfect for you. Mm-hmm. And some things are really, a lot of times we avoid hard truths. And I think that makes us make terrible decisions. So he said, the bottom 3 things, and this is from memory. I'm closing my eyes because I need to think about what's on my notebook here. Number 1 is she's arrogant. thinks she knows everything, was always kind of telling me what to do, even though she doesn't really know that much. Number 2, a little bit entitled, a little bit spoiled, loved shopping. Loved shopping. And he didn't. He's a very outdoorsy guy. And then there's one more. What was the other one that he didn't like?
Kids.
Oh, yeah. She wanted to have kids immediately, and he didn't want kids right away. And granted, they were very young, so he wants kids eventually, but not at 17.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is just one example. And again, it's an anonymous example, one of my clients. But it's really important for him to go back and reflect, okay, what are the bright spots, the things that I loved about that? Because hindsight is 20/20. And I told him that there's so much to learn from our past that's just sitting there. The only goal here is not to bash anybody. It's not to pick on anybody. And I think a lot of people are like, well, they're so nice. It's like, that's good. That's the bright spot. Okay, what comes with that? There's an upside with every downside. There's a downside with every upside. Every strength comes with a weakness. Every weakness comes with a strength. I might have a lot of self-belief. That's the strength, but the weakness is arrogance. Sometimes I can be a little bit arrogant or overly intense or lack humility. So it's not, the key here is to sit down and be honest with yourself. Honest with yourself. And he had a really hard time saying these truths, particularly the dark spots. And I think a lot of us are programmed one way or another. We are programmed and conditioned to look for only the good, or we are programmed and conditioned to look for only the bad. Neither one of those are the whole picture. And if you don't have the whole picture, you basically can't make effective decisions. And I told him, I said, this is the cool part. We just went through all 3 of your past relationships. We looked at all the bright spots and all the dark spots. And now you know your preferences. You know more about yourself. The gold is there. And now you can choose in the future a partner that is in alignment with those things. Now, is she going to be perfect? No. But she's going to be significantly more aligned than if you just took a shot in the dark and didn't learn about yourself. And so I said the whole goal of this exercise is to learn about you and yourself and your preferences. And that does not mean that you out there watching or listening, just because there's a couple things that you're not thrilled about in your relationship, does not mean it's not for you. There's always things that are a little bit challenging in every single relationship. At least that's what Emilia and I have found.
So I have a question for you in that exercise that you did with this client. Did you also turn the coin on them and ask them what were their bright spots and dark spots that they brought to the relationship?
I didn't, but the reason why, and I did in terms of what he thinks his strengths and weaknesses are, because we always sort of do that analysis. But the problem is that would be something I would want to talk to his partners about, because it's very hard the self-awareness piece. I do an exercise in my coaching. It's called the manifestation equation, and one of them is self-awareness. One of the 6 steps. It's a 10-step process, and I've done this dozens of times, if not 100 times. And the people with the lowest self-awareness I've found actually rate themselves the highest, which I think is fascinating. And so it's hard to, hey, what do you think is great about you? When it's someone who they might be very off about themselves. And so I'd much rather talk to their partners or have them go ask their partner. Right. Like, what was great about this relationship? What wasn't? And that's one thing that I've done in the past too, love. I didn't mention this, but I've told you I've talked to my exes. And when I first got in a car accident at 26 and I went into this sort of self-improvement spree, this personal development obsession, I actually called people from my past and I said, what did you notice about me? What were my blind spots? What were my strengths? What were my weaknesses? What did you notice about me that I might not have noticed about myself? And one of my exes, her name was Alicia, she said, you never, ever, ever talked about your dad. You and your whole family just avoided the conversation. You never wanted to talk about your father. My birth father passed away in a car accident. And that was one of the biggest distinctions of, am I avoiding that? Holy crap. And yeah, maybe there's reasons. It's painful. Whenever you bring it up, people don't know how to react. It's one of those things, but I was unconsciously avoiding that without even knowing. So if you're out there watching or listening, do this with yourself in a room by yourself with a journal. Sit down and do this. And even if you're with your current partner, that's fine, because you'll learn about yourself through this. But the other thing you can do if you want, and make sure you check with your current partner that this is okay, because obviously talking to your exes probably isn't the best idea without talking to your partner first. But you can call the people from your past and ask them honest questions. Here's what I would say about that, though. Be very careful, number one, that they're actually going to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they don't have any ulterior motives to try to get back with you.
Mm-hmm.
And number three, make sure you filter it through your own analysis, because that's their perspective. It doesn't mean that it's the truth, because they have distortion like a lot of people do.
Yeah. And I would add to that, make sure that you close the door after that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will feel like they need to reciprocate after something like that, which then leaves the door open if there are any alternative motives or other things that are left unresolved. So that's just something that I would
maybe
put out
start
there.
with a friend instead of an ex. Like a
I
friend
think
could
that's
give you a
great.
good analysis. This is called 360-degree feedback. You did this in
Exactly.
your company that you were with,
Mm-hmm.
and they did a 360-degree feedback where
Yep.
they were all answering questions about Emilia
Mm-hmm.
and working with Emilia. And did you find that useful?
I found it useful. The only thing when it comes to the relationship aspect that we're talking about is that there are biases. So you, to your point, the third one, filter it through your own lens. I find that when you bring that data and feedback to a coach or a therapist or whatnot, someone that can be a little bit more unbiased than your family or someone who had been in an intimate relationship or someone that's a friend, you're going to be better off with those insights because of the fact that the people that are giving you insights, quote unquote, are inherently biased, right? So I do just want to extend that out there. I've also done this exercise with many of my clients. Honestly, this has been something that has been such a fundamental, even that I went through before meeting you and in my past relationship, something that I would do quite often, which we recount it kind of as like the relationship standards. What are your relationship standards? And you and I believe we have a podcast episode on this, but essentially what the bright spots and low spots or dark spots that you had mentioned, how that translates to is what are the standards of conduct or what are the standards of the relationship or what are the standards of things that you do want in the future relationship that you're going to have? And what are the things that you're going to try to, I don't want to say necessarily avoid, but certainly it can feel like that when you're looking or when you're dating or when you're consciously out there in the field. What are you making sure that you address either right up front, right? Those red flags or those orange flags that maybe you don't want to talk about on the first date because you don't, this partner is attractive and they do check some boxes, right? You match each other's energy. All these things seem to be going well. That's where a lot of couples get what I find in the danger zone because you don't actually address the things that you have learned from your past that are dark spots. And if you don't address them in the earlier stages, it kind of becomes a cost sunk bias type of thing where the relationship standards that you had promised to yourself after doing this exercise really could have been proven to be fruitful. Yet, did you have the courage on the next kind of go around to really address and confront some of the things that you don't really want in your relationship anymore? Did you have the courage to say, "Oop, this is a red flag and I'm not going to steamroll over that again because I know how this ultimately could end"? That's the biggest thing.
Hey everyone, this is Alicia Romanowitz. I wanted to take a second and give a shout out to Alan and Emilia. I've been listening to Next Level University podcast for a while now, and I've also joined in on group coaching and book club, and I've gained so much value from these. And recently, I have started listening to the Conscious Couple podcast, and then joined in on their monthly meetups with relationship talks. And from here, my wife and I decided to jump on a call with them, and we had a few questions. This has just been a great experience. They not only provided us with some great tips and things to implement, they also got back with us and to check and see how we were doing. And that has just meant so much to my wife and I. And I just really wanted to give a shout out and thank them so much. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to the podcast or join in on the relationship talks, I highly recommend that. And also just jump on a call with them and get to know them a little bit better and just really lean into this resource. It's just been so valuable and I really appreciate it.
On the call with this person, I ended up saying, can you imagine my level of intensity, my level of drive with someone who has no goals? And he said, dude, no way. And I said, that was the mistake I made.
Yeah.
I told myself a story that I was okay with being with a partner who wasn't as aspirational as me.
Oh, yeah.
And you did the same thing.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, how obvious is it that would never have worked.
It's so silly.
It's so silly.
So silly and not fair to past Emilia. Like
Same.
when I look back at past Emilia and all the relationships that I either dipped my toe in, jumped full throttle into, regardless of the involvement, it was so wild to see how ultimately what ended up happening was breaking off pieces of myself or putting parts of myself on hold or on the sidelines just so that I could coexist in a relationship. And that wasn't fair to me and past Emilia. And that certainly wasn't fair to the person that I was engaging with, because ultimately they get this semi version of me. And when you think about a relationship, if the goal really is to grow from relationships, which you and I inherently believe in
100%. That's the point of this podcast.
Right. Then you would want to bring your whole self to the relationship as much as possible and make sure that there's a ladder that you're climbing to be able to do that if you're not initially doing that up front.
This person, I said, hindsight's 20/20. That's why we're doing this exercise.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, what is obvious to you? And he said that I was suppressing my true self.
Yeah.
And so hopefully your partner is someone who amplifies your true self more than suppresses it. And a lot of times this isn't even by any negative. This was not a negative thing.
Yeah.
He wasn't saying that she was suppressing me on purpose. We went through and I'll share this too, anonymously, of course, but like one of the relationships was very toxic.
Yeah.
I said, brother, no worries. Everybody gets one. And this was a very dark relationship. As a matter of fact, when we did the bright spots and dark spots, he could only think of one bright spot.
Oh, yeah.
He loved her family.
Yeah.
He's like, she had a great family.
Yeah.
And that was it. And when he said that and he couldn't come up with another one, he's like, dude, I honestly don't think I can come up with another one. I said, I knew that was, and I said, okay, negatives. And and I've been in a relationship where I kind of don't know if I can come up with anything good.
Yeah.
And if anyone's out there watching or listening and you feel that way right now, do what you got to do to get out.
Yeah.
If you feel like that in the past, everybody has that relationship where they just felt like they couldn't be even a lick of themselves.
Right.
And if you feel that way, it is time to seek help.
Press
for sure.
the red button
Press the
if
red
you need
button.
to.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that a lot of people overcook the turkey, and that was definitely me.
Same.
So I feel you out there if you are out there and listening to this and realizing that we've tried everything and nothing really is changing. And here's the thing. My question would be, number one, have you tried relationship talks coaching? Because if you haven't, that's not everything. And that is wildly fascinating when it comes to couples that go through different transition periods. But
there's no way it's not going to help. It will help
definitely.
tremendously. So if you're in the dark, please reach out.
And one of the things about that I'm going to try to articulate is that relationship talks coaching, what I've found at least, babe, is that we help inherently bring people closer to themselves. I know that that's been the through line in my practice individually. Like I can't help it. I can't help but bring people closer to unveiling and
who they really are.
Yeah. And really working closer day to day in that true self. And that is something that is a beautiful gift I know that you and I have. And it can sometimes scare people away because all of that facade, all of that story that they've been telling themselves to stay in the relationship sometimes crumbles. Or
to stay in the job, or to stay in the family, or to stay in the house.
But the crumbling is always better off than continuously layering on and building up this giant facade, because eventually it will crumble. And it's better off to have that happen in a safe zone where people actually have been trained and have so much experience on how to rebuild from that place than to try to go and do that on your own.
So the three circles that we use is the outer circle is who you want others to believe you are. The next circle in is who you want to believe you are. The inner circle is who you really are. That's what relationship talks coaching will help you do. It will help you and your partner get back to who you really are, which is where the fulfillment and the joy and the love flourishes. And for me, the car accident at 26, I'm 36. I'm about to be 36 now. So 10 years ago almost. It's wild.
Goodness.
Yeah, November, I'm 36.
Look at you.
Going on 87 here. But anyways,
My honey.
sweetheart, I am significantly older than you, but not a lick wiser. But anyways, so the car accident was what you referred to as an ego death.
Yeah.
Which is everything I thought about myself, all the relationships that I was in. It just brought me fully,
all the rings collapsed.
yeah, all the rings collapsed and they stayed. They all brought me to my true self. And that was very traumatic because it was a really short amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be very traumatic.
It can be very traumatic. But the good news is I've worked really hard over the last 9 years to keep those rings the same.
Yeah.
I want who I want others to believe I am, who I want to believe I am, and who I really am to be the same so that I can make good decisions based on who I really am. Because if you're making decisions in relationship or job or career or whatever based on not who you really are,
oh yeah,
then you're going to be unfulfilled and wonder why, and then you're going to think something's wrong with you, and that makes it worse. It becomes this whole
you're
doom
going to burn
loop.
out. There's giant mental health implications on that end up turning into physical ailments and physiological issues.
And you and I in our past relationships, if we were to look back and do this exercise, bright spots and dark spots, it would be obvious that we were not being our full true selves.
Yep.
And this is the first relationship I've ever been in where I'm 100% Alan. If anything, I'm being dialed up in the true self. And you know what's ironic with you and I, babe, and I've shared this before, but I want to share this again. With other relationships, I felt like I had to be a little different to make it work.
Yeah.
With you, the only time it doesn't work is when I'm not being my whole self. Isn't that so ironic? That's wild.
Yeah.
And if you're out there watching or listening and you resonated with that, you have the person. I mean, that's just awesome. So good for you. It doesn't mean it won't be challenging at times. It doesn't mean you won't have tough moments. But if they amplify who you really are and they want you to shine in who you really are, that's what matters.
Right.
And the point of this relationship, the point of this podcast is growth.
Yeah.
Mutual growth. So I'm good. Is there anything
I was
you want to add?
say the only thing I want to be really realistic when it comes to our listeners, that is very rare. What you and I have cultivated. And the reason underneath that is because you and I have both done the work. We have a podcast episode that talks about doing the work. And because of your ego death at 26, you actually were kind of forced onto a path by what had happened to you and how you responded to it. That was your choice. But down a path that was very self-discovery, self-exploratory, and put you in the path to do the work. And so you and I have done the work. And that is why I know that it is very unique and accessible, because not a lot of the times two partners do the work that release themselves of their insecurities and of the suffering that they have from the past traumas, whatever that they have. And so I do just want to be mindful of expectations around that, because that is something that is a ladder for a lot of relationships when they do the work.
Let's do this. So the 3 relationships in this anonymous example, hopefully he was able to be more and more and more of his true self throughout the journey of relationships. And the truth is, the first one, yes. Second one, hell no, according to him, not me. The third one, yes. Yeah. And now whatever the next one will hopefully be an even more dialed up version of who he is.
Right.
And hopefully will amplify the best in him. And I think that's what a great relationship is it's someone who inspires you and helps you become the best version of yourself.
Absolutely. The trend line's up.
Yeah, the trend line is up. Like. And so it took me 30 years.
Yeah.
And it took you less than 30. So I'm proud of you.
Almost.
Strong work.
30 years.
25, honey.
25.
Yeah, we met at 20 when you were 25.
It's a product of doing the work.
Yeah, he's sweet. Okay. But anyway, so we got to jump. We have things to talk about.
We do.
Relationship Talks coaching. Okay, so we have a hybrid model where I coach the male, she coaches the female. And then sometimes we flip-flop, and then we also have one monthly 4-person session. It's really fascinating what happens when you have the one-on-one, 2-to-2 situation. I mean, you want to talk about getting to the lick of the truth of everything and seeing the 360-degree feedback. Very cool. That's been fascinating as hell. So hybrid model. We also have regular Relationship Talks coaching, which now in hindsight doesn't seem nearly as cool as the hybrid. But Relationship Talks coaching, we do weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly. The first one is free. Completely free. We're not going to sell you anything. We just want to meet you. We're excited to meet you. We have Relationship Talks events every single month, which Emilia is going to talk about.
The next one that is coming up is going to be on the topic of how to not be held back by your relationship. And that is something that we find more often than not in this growth community that we have cultivated, the conscious couples and conscious singles community. There is usually one partner that is super growth oriented or on the growth oriented path far more than their partner. And one of the biggest challenges that we've seen in this conscious couples community is, how do I continue to grow and not be held back by my partner? And so we have talked about this lightly on podcast, but we're going to do a deep dive, because what we found with relationships is if you can do the things that we're going to talk about. I don't want to give away all the goodies in this relationship talks event. If you can do these things and bring these truths and cultivate this type of safe space with your partner, the chances of your partner not holding you back continuously increase and skyrocket. You and your partner growing together and not apart. If you don't do these things, however, we've seen quite the opposite.
Yeah, you and your partner are either growing together or growing apart. I have a client right now, again, business coaching clients, so I'll keep it anonymous as always. But he and his partner have been together for 1.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, now that I'm in momentum, now that I'm getting after it, now that I started the coaching, now that I started investing in myself, I'm feeling it. This is great. But me and my partner aren't getting along like we did.
Right.
And I said, well, what do you think is the root of that? He said, I think I'm growing and I'm afraid that she's going to hold me back and I'm not going to be able to achieve my goals and dreams.
Right.
And I said, brother, relationship talks. And so he might be signing up.
I hope
so
he does.
I'm super excited.
I
But
hope he does.
if you feel that way, like my client does, we are here for you. Please reach out. The link will be in the show notes.
Yep.
As always, thank you for listening. We appreciate you. And it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is Lazarus88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.